Welcome back everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. She slid the divorce papers across the table with a smug little smile, the kind she wore whenever she thought I was broken, and begging. I'm Malik Carter. Her attorney sat beside her, pleased with himself, while two of her friends waited outside the conference room like this was a victory lap. I read the first page, then signed without blinking. No argument. No pleading. That calm made her hesitate. The judge cleared his throat and asked my counsel to summarize my verified holdings. When the numbers landed, her smile disappeared mid-breath, and the room went. She came for everything, and she came with a story she rehearsed. In her version, I was a quiet man who never made it, a husband she outgrew, a paycheck she deserved to collect. She assumed I would fight from a place of panic. She assumed I would bargain. She assumed wrong. I had already taken my real life off the table, because I wasn't building an app anymore. I was building an escape plan. If you want to understand how she walked into court thinking she owned me, you have to start 6 years earlier, where she learned my silence and mistook it. 6 years earlier, I met Tiana Caldwell at a birthday party in East Austin. The music was loud, the lighting flattering, the crowd curated. I stood near the kitchen with a beer, ready to leave, because that kind of performance never felt like home to me. She walked in late wearing a red dress that looked simple until you noticed it fit like intent. Heads turned. She scanned the room, spotted me, and walked straight over. She studied my face like a question and said, "You look like someone who doesn't belong here." I heard the line and stayed. She laughed too, and the room faded into background noise. Tiana had confidence that felt sharp and controlled, like she could collect attention without asking for it. She asked what I did, and I said I built software. She asked why I looked tired, and I said I was always building. She told me ambition looked good on quiet men. I believed her, because I wanted to. I remember thinking she was out of my league, then hearing myself talk like we had history. That night ended with her number in my phone and her hand on my arm. I didn't notice how she watched. For the first months, she was perfect in the ways people notice and applaud. She showed up at my office with a brisket from my favorite spot and a handwritten note folded into my laptop bag. "Keep building. I believe in you." She sat beside me while I coded, scrolling quietly, touching my shoulder like she was anchoring me. She never complained about my hours. She said she loved my focus, how I could disappear into work and come back with answers. I took it as support. Looking back, it was scouting. She was learning my habits, my weaknesses, and how easy it was to make me grateful for basic kindness. Within a year, we moved into a one-bedroom apartment near Mueller, clean and modest, with traffic outside and thin walls inside. Tiana said we didn't need much, just us and a dream. She said it like a promise, but it landed like a plan. Real love is messy and honest. Hers was polished and consistent, the kind that makes you stop asking questions. She gave me a version of herself that was easy to fall for, then waited until I was deep enough to stop imagining an exit. When I proposed, she smiled like she had been expecting the question. She said yes quickly, then started talking about upgrades. I called it excitement. The shift didn't start with shouting. It started with comments that sounded playful if you wanted them to. "You wear those shoes every day," she said once, smiling. "One day you'll make enough to take me to New York," she said another time, laughing, then watching my face for reaction. I laughed along because I didn't want to look sensitive. I told myself teasing meant comfort. But the timing was always surgical. She'd say it when her friends were near, when a waiter was listening, when my paycheck had just cleared. I would feel the sting, then bury it under a grin. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her smile did the cutting. Tiana came from money, not old money quiet, but close enough to believe it should bow for her. Her father ran a fund. Her brother opened restaurants in Miami. A cousin owned a vineyard in Napa. My parents were public school teachers in Texas, and I paid for college with scholarships, night shifts, and exhaustion. At first she said our differences didn't matter. Later, the same facts became a tool. "You wouldn't understand," she'd say, calm. "That's not how we do things," she'd add, sharper. It was never loud, just precise enough to make me feel like a guest in my own life. I worked harder, and somehow felt smaller. To be fair, it wasn't all bad. There were nights we watched old movies with popcorn on the couch, and she traced floor plans on a notepad like the house already existed. She wanted marble floors, a closet bigger than our apartment, and a pool shaped like a grand piano. I laughed and said we would get there. She kissed my cheek and told me she believed in my future. Even toxic relationships have highlight reels, that's how they survive. The good moments weren't proof of health. They were bandages over damage. I would point to those nights as evidence I was wrong to worry. She would point to them as proof she was generous. We both used the same scenes differently. Then the focus she praised became a problem. "You're married to your laptop," she said one night, setting her wine glass down too hard. I was working 12, sometimes 14 hours, building a product I believed in, because I wanted stability. She stopped bringing food, stopped asking how things were going, and started going out more. "Girls' night," she said, and nights became weekends. She said she needed space, that we were growing apart, that I was quiet and closed off. I was the same man I had been. The difference was my work was getting serious, and her patience was getting thin. Love didn't change. Her demands did. I didn't know the rules were being rewritten. I gave her the space she asked for. She traveled more, a weekend in Chicago, then Las Vegas, then Miami, then Atlanta, always last minute, always with friends I never met. She returned with a tan, new perfume, and less patience. Kisses became nods. Touch became distance. I stayed in my chair, same hoodie, same coffee, same code, believing the future would fix the present. I called it loyalty. It was naivete. She wasn't taking space to breathe. She was creating distance on purpose, the kind that becomes an alibi. I kept telling myself a launch would stabilize us, like success could repair disrespect. I didn't see she was already practicing life without me. I came home to a quiet apartment with the lights off, no music, no conversation. Her heels stayed by the door. Her makeup stayed on the sink. Her perfume stayed on the sheets. She wasn't gone, but she wasn't with me. We lived under the same roof without sharing a moment for weeks. No couch nights. No laughter. No "how was your day?" Silence filled every corner, louder than shouting. I kept believing that once the product launched and money came in, things would stabilize. I didn't realize she had already decided what I was worth. She kept her things in place like stage props, while she pulled her presence out piece by piece. I lived with evidence of her, not her. I would walk into a room and feel like I was interrupting something, even when we were the only two people there. I would speak and she would keep scrolling, offering a nod or a sigh, sometimes nothing. I started second-guessing myself, editing every sentence before it left my mouth. I cooked dinner, she ate silently, then disappeared into the bedroom with the door half shut. There were no fights, no explosions, just cold air that never warmed. The worst part is I adjusted to it. I stopped asking why she was distant and started asking how to be smaller. I moved softer. I talked less. I tried not to trigger a sigh. I called it keeping peace. It was losing ground. On weekends, she was glowing, but not for me. Rooftop bars, winery tastings, spa days, brunches with friends I never met. The selfies got bolder. The captions got colder. Deserve the life you love. Your vibe attracts your tribe. She wasn't talking to me, she was talking past me, letting me watch. I stayed in, fixing bugs, chasing deadlines, reheating leftovers. She came home late, smelling like perfume I didn't buy, smiling like she had a secret. Sometimes she didn't come home at all. Just a text, crashing at Jasmine's. Don't wait up. Two people under one roof, living two different lives. I still hoped she would choose us. I didn't admit she already had chosen something else. Little by little, I felt like a placeholder. Not a husband, but a steady base someone keeps until the next thing is ready. I asked how her day was, she shrugged. I suggested a weekend trip, she already had plans. When I brought it up, she sighed like I was needy, like wanting connection was weakness. I kept building because work was the only place effort still meant something. But something cracked inside me, not because she left, but because she made me feel like I wasn't worth staying for. She didn't have to say I wasn't enough. She just stopped looking at me like I ever had been. I kept apologizing to keep the air calm, even when I couldn't name what I was apologizing for. I started wondering if I was the problem. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I wasn't excited. Maybe I was too quiet. She didn't argue. She didn't deny it. She let me carry the blame because it made her exit cleaner. When I finally asked if something was wrong, she smiled, leaned in, and said, "You're just so sensitive lately." That sentence landed like a trap closing. Suddenly I was apologizing for things I didn't understand. Sorry if I walked in too fast. Sorry if I forgot the mail. Sorry if you look upset even when you say you're not. I was managing her mood like it was my job. She never needed to raise her voice. Her calmness made my doubt look unreasonable. I started believing her version of me. Her control didn't need shouting. It lived in pauses, side glances, and little comments that cut without looking like cuts. "Are you always this slow?" she asked once, calm. "You really don't get it, do you?" she added, like she was teaching a child. Not insults on paper, just daily pinpricks that bled out confidence. I wasn't living with a partner, I was living with a mirror that only showed me what I lacked. My world got smaller. My best friend Donnell used to come by on Sundays for wings and a game. Then Tiana asked, "Does he need to be here again?" I stopped inviting Donnell. I told myself it was maturity. It was isolated. She didn't ban anyone. She trained me to remove them myself. My sister Keisha tried to visit for my birthday. Tiana said we were too busy and told me to reschedule. I did. Even my mother's calls started feeling like interruptions because Tiana would sigh loud enough for me to hear from the next room. She never said don't see them. She didn't have to. I stopped reaching out, stopped showing up, and somehow thanked her for the quiet. Then nothing I did was right. If I forgot the trash, I was careless. If I took initiative, I was trying too hard. If I stayed quiet, I was unavailable. I began walking softer, talking less, editing myself in real time. I didn't want to be exhausting. It became easier, and disappeared while standing there. I didn't notice how much of myself I handed away. There is a silence that doesn't come from peace. It comes from shame. I provided. I stayed loyal. I kept promises. None of it earned respect. At dinners with her friends, she interrupted me and said, "Let's not bore everyone with your code stuff," and they laughed politely. That sting wasn't public, it was personal. I started thinking, what is a man without respect in his own home? I wasn't asking for applause. I just wanted to feel like I mattered. Instead, I was afraid to start over, afraid to be the man who couldn't keep his wife. So I kept trying, even when trying started to feel like begging. I called it patience. It was fear wearing a calm face. Noted. So I kept making her coffee every morning, even when she didn't say thank you. I laughed at jokes that cut me down. I stayed silent when she crossed lines because silence felt safer than pushing back. I called it patience. I called it maturity. It was fear dressed up in responsibility. She didn't have to control me because I was already controlling myself to avoid her displeasure. I wasn't loving her, I was trying not to lose her. Those are different. The house grew colder. We didn't fight or laugh. We just existed like strangers sharing square footage. Her eyes stayed on her phone. Mine stared. Through walls. I stopped expecting warmth, then stopped expecting anything. I wasn't living in a home. I was living in a quiet punishment that looked normal from the outside. Then I noticed she smiled at her phone more than she ever smiled at me. She laughed in ways I hadn't heard in months, not with me, but at someone else. She dressed differently, more perfume, more heels, as if she was auditioning for a room I wasn't part of. One night, I heard her giggle in the bathroom, door cracked, whispers. When I walked by, she went silent. "Everything okay?" I asked. She looked up, calm, and said, "You're being paranoid." The word hit hard because I wasn't paranoid. I was finally noticing. Once you notice, you can't unsee it. Her distance wasn't a rough patch anymore. It was a detachment. She was practicing a life without me, and calling my awareness insecurity. I stopped arguing. I started watching. Something changes when you realize someone is already halfway out the door. You stop pleading. You stop trying to prove you are worth staying for. You start watching. I began noticing trips that didn't add up, friends I never met suddenly too important, spa days with no receipts. Her phone stayed face down. She took it into the shower. It stayed silent at home. I didn't accuse her. I logged in. Every late night, every shift in tone, every time she said I was imagining things. I asked myself new questions. Not why she was pulling away, but what she was hiding. I used to feel guilty for noticing. Then I stopped. The truth doesn't need my permission to exist. It just waits until I'm ready to look. I became ready without announcing it. I moved quietly and listened longer than I spoke. It was a Friday night. She thought I would be at the co-working space late. Meetings ended early, so I picked up her favorite Thai food and drove home, thinking I could buy one quiet night of normal. When I pulled into the garage, I heard music and laughter, high-pitched and performative. I paused with my hand on the door because my stomach warned me. I cracked it open. Tiana stood in the living room wearing a black silk robe, champagne in hand. 3 friends were there, plus one woman I didn't know. Someone said, "You're glowing." Tiana twirled her glass and said, "I should be. I'm about to be free." Another asked, "Does he know?" Tiana laughed and said, "He still thinks we're just going through something." I stayed in the garage and kept listening. Noted. Then she said the line that turned my blood cold, "He's got nothing. No money. No spine. Just that dumb little app." I didn't storm in. I didn't throw the food. I closed the garage door and sat in the dark with the engine off. The takeout bag cooled on the passenger seat, like everything else. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I went quiet, like someone turned the volume down on my life. She hadn't just fallen out of love. She had written the ending and invited an audience. And I had been trying to fix a chapter she already closed. In that silence, something final settled inside me. Not rage. Clarity. A clean decision without drama. I sat until the clock moved forward, then walked inside like nothing happened. That was the night I stopped believing in us. That night didn't break me. It revealed me. I had been trying to save a marriage that had already flatlined. Sitting in that garage with her words echoing, a switch flipped. I didn't plot revenge. I woke up. I realized I wasn't married to a partner, I was married to a performance, and I was the only one still reading the script. So I decided I would not be the fool in her story. After that, I stopped reacting. I still made her coffee. I still answered politely. But I wasn't absorbing the cuts anymore. I was storing them, labeling them, and letting them guide me. I didn't announce a change. I became different in silence. That kind of quiet makes certain people nervous, because it means something moved and they didn't feel it happen. She didn't notice at first. She never expected me to move at all. Tiana thought I was harmless, a quiet man in hoodies typing into the void. She never asked who I really was, and I never volunteered. Long before we met, I built a small mobile app. It didn't go viral, but an investor group noticed the architecture underneath it. We made a private deal. No headlines. No celebration. Just contracts. I moved the proceeds into a Delaware LLC, then into another, then into silent partnerships and licensing agreements. I never parked money where curiosity could reach it. While she laughed at my little app, I was already protecting what it created. I didn't flash new cars or expensive watches. I kept my life ordinary on purpose. Ordinary men don't get audited by jealous eyes. Ordinary men don't get questioned at dinner parties. Let her think I was broke. The less she knew, the safer it stayed. I didn't just build money. I built a fortress around it. I drove the same car for 10 years, not because I had to, but because background noise doesn't get inspected. I wore the same hoodie and jeans because nobody asks questions about a man who looks ordinary. Tiana thought we rented because we were struggling. The truth was I didn't want our names on anything that could become a weapon later. The lease stayed in her name. The furniture stayed on her cards. The trips were paid with points from corporate accounts she never saw. I wasn't playing poorly. I was planning for protection. I had watched what money does to people, how curiosity turns into entitlement, how love turns into invoices. I decided early that if success arrived, it would arrive quietly, and it would stay guarded. She mocked what she couldn't see. That worked in my favor. After the garage, I moved with precision. I didn't ask friends for advice. I didn't vent. I didn't leave digital trails. I started with an old name, Mr. Holloway, a retired divorce attorney my father once respected. No website. No voicemail. I went to his house and we talked on his back porch, birds louder than our voices. He listened without interrupting, then handed me 2 names written on a plain index card: Reggie Brooks, forensic accountant, and Layla James, private investigator. Trusted, discreet. I paid in cash. I didn't need comfort. I needed proof, patterns, and numbers that didn't lie. Mr. Holloway said one sentence that stuck: "You're not trying to destroy her. You're making sure she can't destroy you." I nodded and went home without changing my face. Reggie taught me to look past what was spent and focus on where, when, and with who. Tiana was careful, always pulling amounts just under thresholds that trigger review. Spa days that didn't happen. Dinners I didn't attend. Gift purchases I never received. Layla filled in blanks with timestamps, photos, and location notes. It wasn't just one man. It wasn't even 2. It was 3, in 3 different cities. Each one thought he was the only one. Reggie didn't flinch, he just organized. Layla didn't dramatize, she documented. The information didn't make me scream. It made me still. Truth doesn't always arrive as pain. Sometimes it arrives as clarity that removes every excuse you used to survive. I stopped asking why. I started preparing for what was next. I didn't talk to Tiana about it. I didn't need her confession. I needed the record. I started writing everything down by hand. Dates, times, places, exact words. I kept copies off the cloud and off my usual devices. One encrypted drive in a safe deposit box, another locked in a fireproof case, and paper copies stored outside our home. I learned to treat every conversation like evidence. If she said she was visiting Jasmine, I wrote the time she left and the time she returned. If she claimed a meeting, I noted the outfit, the perfume, the tone. I didn't confront her. I collected. I still cooked dinner. I still asked neutral questions. She answered casually, because she believed I was predictable. Predictable men don't keep binders. Predictable men don't hire investigators. She grew comfortable. Comfort makes people careless. Carelessness leaves trails. Trails become timelines. Timelines win cases. I kept my face calm so she wouldn't tighten her story. I needed her to keep being herself. Then she made her move. On a Thursday, I was at the co-working space, hoodie on, headphones in. The front desk clerk handed me a manila folder and said it looked important. Divorce papers. A pink sticky note in Tiana's handwriting read, "Don't worry, I'll be gentle." I felt no panic, just confirmation. Later, Donnell sent screenshots from a group chat. Tiana had posted pictures of the papers with captions like, "Finally did it. Poor guy thinks he's getting the house." She was celebrating. She thought it was finished. I didn't call her. I didn't ask why. I read the pages slowly and noticed what she wanted, the obvious things. The apartment. The car. Support. A clean story. She didn't mention what she didn't know existed. That detail told me everything. She wasn't leaving to be free. She was leaving to collect. When the courier delivered the final packet, neatly stamped, I read every page. She wanted the apartment lease. Fine. She wanted the car. Fine. She wanted support. Fine. I didn't argue, because she was fighting over the wrong kingdom. I signed each page slowly, like I was approving a blueprint I designed. Most men fight and drag it out. I didn't. That calm shook her more than anger would have. When I handed it to my attorney, Simone Price, I didn't ask if we could win. I said, "Let it go exactly like this." Simone didn't smile. She nodded once, like she understood the whole plan without a speech. I was letting Tiana win what could be taken, so she would keep thinking she was winning everything. Confidence makes people reckless. I wanted her to be reckless. I wanted her to keep spending, keep posting, keep talking. I wanted her to build her own case without realizing she was building it. Silence makes certain people spiral. Tiana expected a fight, a tearful speech, a plea. She got nothing. She bragged that I folded. Then she started watching me more closely, checking my socials, calling mutual friends, reaching out with fake concern. She sent one message, just checking on you. I didn't reply. That unanswered space made her nervous. People like Tiana understand conflict. They panic when the other side refuses to engage because it suggests the decision was already made. She began spending louder. Designer bags. Weekend trips. High-end dinners. She posted champagne and captions about new beginnings. I didn't comment. I forwarded every receipt and screenshot to Reggie. I kept thinking I was defeated. Defeated men don't plan. Defeated men don't prepare. She needed to believe I was defeated. She performed victory, and her performance produced evidence. I stayed quiet and watched her build the record that would collapse her. Reggie built a clean timeline from the spending. He highlighted patterns, withdrawals just under review limits, consistent spikes on certain Fridays, hotel charges on nights she claimed leadership retreats. Layla tracked the movement behind the money. She sent photos without drama. A man in sunglasses picking Tiana up at 10 p.m., Tiana laughing in a hotel lobby we once walked through together, Tiana holding a hand that wasn't mine at a candlelit table. It wasn't cinematic. It was factual. Each photo had a date and time. Each receipt had a location. Each pattern made her story thinner. I didn't ask for explanations. I didn't demand apologies. I didn't confront her at dinner. Confrontation would have invited lies. Facts don't need invitations. Facts just wait until the right room. I kept building the binder, tabs, indexes, summaries, cross-references. I treated my marriage like a case file because that's what it had become. She acted like I was slow. I wasn't slow. I was deliberate. Recorded. My legal team stayed small and quiet. Simone Price led, precise and allergic to theatrics. Clarissa Grant handled trusts and asset protections. 2 paralegals managed exhibits and deadlines. A litigation specialist reviewed the procedure so nothing could be dismissed on technical mistakes. We met in person, different offices, different times, minimal calls. Every meeting was methodical, recordings, bank statements, travel logs, and the difference between claims and facts. Simone said court is allergic to emotion, and I believed her because emotion had already cost me too much. We built the strategy like a blueprint. No speeches, just documents. Tiana was preparing her narrative, we were preparing evidence. Evidence doesn't care how charming someone is. Evidence doesn't care how loud someone talks. Evidence holds or it doesn't. Ours held. I didn't want to embarrass her for sport. I wanted protection and finality. I wanted the court to see what I saw in the garage, contempt dressed as confidence. I wanted the judge to see patterns, not personalities. We stayed focused. While she planned her exit, I reinforced mine. I separated finances in ways that looked boring on the surface. I opened an account at a different bank. I moved money in amounts too small to trigger attention. 900 here, 450 there, always consistent, always quiet. I transferred certain holdings into trusts that had been drafted before our marriage. Clarissa reviewed every clause and ensured my compliance with disclosure rules. She reminded me, anything you reveal becomes something she can aim at. So we revealed nothing beyond what the law required. We prepared. I didn't hide assets illegally. I structured assets responsibly, the same way companies do every day. Tiana thought success meant showing off. I knew success also meant protecting. I kept my routine steady: work, home, coffee, silence. She saw no shift and assumed she was safe. Meanwhile, the file grew thicker. The timeline got cleaner. The case got stronger. I wasn't fighting her feelings. I was preparing for her actions. Actions leave records. Records win hearings. I stayed patient because patience had a purpose now. Then came discovery, and discovery is where performances die. Simone filed motions that required full financial disclosure, a forensic review of joint accounts, and scrutiny of any claim Tiana made about being broke. The requests were boring to read but brutal to answer. Tiana didn't expect paperwork to hit like a punch. The first time she realized the ground was moving, she tried to transfer money and got blocked by a court order. She called her attorney, then called me. I didn't answer. She texted, "This is insane. What are you doing?" I didn't reply. Civil doesn't mean harmless. Civil means controlled. We were controlled. She was used to controlling me with tone and silence. Now the court controlled deadlines and disclosures. She couldn't sigh her way out of it. She couldn't smile her way through it. The documents required answers. If she lied, the record showed it. If she avoided, the judge noticed. Discovery forced her into the one place she hated, accountability. I stayed quiet and let the process work. That was the point. She tried to charm her way out. She showed up at my co-working space once, unannounced, makeup perfect, voice soft. She said she didn't want this to get ugly. She asked if we could talk like adults. I listened without moving, then told her all communication should go through counsel. Her softness dropped for a second and her eyes hardened, then she walked away like she still had dignity left to preserve. That moment confirmed something: she didn't miss me. She missed control. She wanted the version of me that would panic, bargain, and accept blame. That version was gone. I didn't announce it. I simply stopped playing my assigned role. Later that night, she left a message accusing me of being cruel. Simone heard it and said nothing. We added it to the file. Cruelty is a feeling. Threats and manipulation are statements. Statements can be documented. We documented them. I kept my voice calm at home to avoid giving her anything she could twist into abuse. I refused to be cast. Depositions were scheduled. Reg's reports were clean. Layla's surveillance logs were tight. Simone told me, "Your job is to be boring and consistent." So I was. I showed up on time. I answered questions directly. I didn't improvise. I didn't embellish. Tiana, on the other hand, performed. She used confident language and vague details. She claimed she needed support because she was barely surviving. Then her own spending contradicted her. Hotel charges. Luxury purchases. Frequent travel. Reg's timeline lined those charges up with her sworn words, and the gap was obvious. That's what lies create: gaps. The court lives in gaps. Simone didn't insult Tiana, she asked questions that forced the gaps into view. Tiana grew impatient and defensive. Judges hear impatience. They hear defensiveness. They also hear consistency, and our side stayed consistent. I didn't celebrate. I just stayed steady. My goal wasn't to hurt her. My goal was to stop her from hurting me. The week before court, Tiana escalated, as if volume could change facts. She posted more, shopped more, traveled more, and told friends I was bitter. She also started making small mistakes, the kind people make when they are scared. She left her laptop open. She left messages on the speaker. She mentioned names and dates she had previously denied. I kept writing. I kept saving. I kept forwarding. It wasn't spying, it was documenting what she exposed. Simone coached me on how judges hear things, not the loudest story, but the clearest record. I stopped saying I feel, and started saying she did. I stopped describing motives and started describing actions. She left at 7:10. She returned at 2:05. She charged the account at 9:43. She texted Jasmine at 11:12. Those details remove debate. Debate is where liars breathe. Facts suffocate lies without raising a voice. I stayed calm at home while my file got louder than any argument could. She mocked my quiet, not realizing it was building weight in court. The first courtroom appearance was brief, but it shifted the air. Tiana arrived with posture and a fixed smile. I arrived with Simone and Clarissa, no performance, just presence. The judge asked for preliminary disclosures. Simone handed over organized documents. Tiana's attorney handed over summaries with missing details. The judge set deadlines and reminded both sides that misrepresentation would not be tolerated. Tiana smiled as if the warning was for me. Afterward, in the hallway, she whispered to her friends that the judge seemed reasonable, like reason would protect her. Reason protects the prepared. The next weeks were all deadlines, filings, and production. Reg's reports arrived on time. Our exhibits were labeled clearly. Our requests were narrow and lawful. We didn't ask for drama, we asked for records. Records arrived. With each record, her poor and struggling story shrank. With each record, her confidence became less believable. The system doesn't care who looks confident. The system cares who can prove what they claim. We could. She couldn't. I didn't smile about that. I simply watched it happen. Over the next weeks, subpoenas went out. Financial institutions complied. Transaction histories came back. Reggie flagged irregularities and explained them in plain language that a judge could follow. Tiana's story began to collapse under its own weight. She claimed she wasn't spending. The records showed consistent luxury charges. She claimed she was traveling for personal growth. Hotel bookings under her maiden name said otherwise. She claimed certain gifts were for friends, receipts tied to dates she spent the night away from home. The pattern became clear. She lived one life in public and another in private, and she wanted the court to fund both. Simone didn't call her a liar. Simone presented contradictions and let the judge use the word. That mattered. Courts punish accusations that sound like bitterness. Courts reward presentations that sound like evidence. We stayed evidence. Tiana tried to be charming and outraged at the same time, and the mix looked unstable. She had been able to manage me with tone. She couldn't manage a court file. The record is stubborn. It doesn't flinch when someone smiles. It doesn't soften when someone cries. It just stays. Tiana tried to settle once she realized her leverage was gone. Her offer came through counsel, polite, framed like generosity. She proposed keeping everything quiet if I agreed to generous terms. Simone called me and asked what I wanted. I said no. Not because I wanted punishment, but because I wanted the record to reflect reality. A settlement without accountability would let her rewrite the story later. She could tell people I hid money, that I abandoned her, that she walked away with dignity. I wanted the court record to show what was true: her spending, her deception, her contempt. Truth matters when someone is good at performance. I was done being performed on. Simone warned that trials are stressful, but I told her I had already lived the stressful part at home. The court was paperwork with a microphone. There was a lot of pressure at home every day. I chose court. She didn't like that. She liked private control. The court removed her private control. That was the point. The final hearing arrived, and the courtroom felt smaller than it should. The judge reviewed filings, then asked for testimony. Tiana spoke first, voice controlled, eyes scanning for sympathy. She described me as distant, obsessed with work, emotionally unavailable. She said she carried the household alone. She said she needed support because she sacrificed for my dream. She claimed she didn't know about certain accounts and suggested I hid money. Then Simone stood and asked permission to introduce exhibits. The judge granted it. Simone presented bank statements, spending logs, timelines, and a clean summary of inconsistencies. She didn't shout. She didn't insult me. She asked direct questions that forced direct answers. Tiana's answers became vague. The judge asked her again, slower, to explain discrepancies. Tiana looked at her attorney. Her attorney looked at the pages. The room got quiet. That quiet wasn't shameful anymore. It was the consequence that arrived. I sat still and watched facts do what arguments never did: hold. The judge spoke calmly, but his words were cut. He noted an apparent effort to manipulate the court, financially and ethically. He referenced specific entries: withdrawals, hotel charges, luxury purchases, and the timing that contradicted her sworn statements. Tiana's shoulders lowered like someone had lost strength. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not power. The judge stated that her financial disclosure appeared intentionally misleading. He denied her request for spousal support. He denied claims to certain shared assets. He noted that credibility matters, and hers had been damaged by the record. Tiana opened her mouth, then closed it. Her attorney shifted in his seat. Simone remained still. She didn't need to celebrate. The ruling read like a receipt. I didn't feel triumph. I felt finality. Finality is different. It's the moment the system confirms you weren't crazy for noticing patterns. It's the moment a smile stops being a weapon. The judge signed. Paper moved. My chest loosened. The war she started in silence ended in documentation. Tiana sat still as the ruling was written, posture straight, spirit broken. She whispered to her attorney fast, but there was nothing left to argue. The paper had spoken. I stood, calm, not triumphant, just finished. She looked at me like she didn't know who I was. Maybe she didn't. The man she tried to humiliate and control died the night I heard her laughing in the living room. The man in the courtroom was someone else, quiet, prepared, and no longer asking for permission to exist. As I turned to leave, she said my name like a question, hoping it would pull me back into our old dynamic. It didn't. In the hallway, her voice cracked for the first time in years. Not sharp. Not smug. Just scared. She reached for me like I was still her safety net. I stepped away. That distance was my answer. She followed me into the hallway, moving fast, heels clicking, voice trembling. She said she didn't understand how it got here. She said we had something. She said she made mistakes. She asked me not to throw it away. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I said, "You threw it away the moment you decided I was beneath you." She started crying, but I had already mourned the marriage in private, in quiet, in the years she turned my home into ice. I didn't need closure from her tears. I needed distance. I walked away without another word. Outside, I stood by my car and breathed. No applause. No audience. Just air. I didn't feel hate. I felt at peace. Peace doesn't shout. Peace just leaves. I got in the car and drove, and the city lights looked the same, but my chest felt different. I didn't belong to her story anymore. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter because she suffered, but lighter because I was no longer carrying the lie. Driving away, I noticed my hands were steady on the wheel. No shaking. No rush to check my phone. No urge to explain myself to anyone. The story had been written in evidence. I didn't need to defend it. I returned to my apartment, now mine alone, and the silence sounded different. Not punishment. No shame. Just space. I ate a simple meal, washed the plate, and went to sleep without bracing for betrayal. In the morning, I made coffee for myself and heard my own thoughts clearly. I wasn't interrupted by sighs or cutting comments. I didn't wait for someone to approve my presence. I just existed. That ordinary feeling was new. It told me what I had been missing, safety. I didn't celebrate. I rested. Over the next weeks, I rebuilt in straightforward ways. I called Donnell and met him for wings like we used to, and he didn't lecture me. He just listened, then said, "I'm glad you're here." I drove to see Keisha and apologized for disappearing, and she didn't demand a speech. She hugged me and handed me a plate of food like that was the only proof she needed. I called my mother back without worrying about a sigh from the next room. Work still mattered, but it wasn't my escape anymore, it was just work. I moved into a place that fit me, not a place chosen as a stage. I kept my routine simple because simplicity felt like recovery. I didn't chase parties or new attention. I didn't need a rebound to prove anything. I needed quiet consistency, the kind I had been denied. Every small act of normal life was proof I was free. I stopped shrinking. I started returning. In quiet moments, I replayed early scenes and noticed what I had missed. The way she studied rooms like she owned them. The way she praised my ambition while measuring my vulnerability. The way she used laughter like a blade. I didn't hate her. Hate keeps you attached. I saw her clearly, and clarity was enough. I also saw myself, the man who shrank to keep peace, the man who confused being chosen with being valued. I didn't shame that version of me. He did what he knew. He believed in promises. But I made a new rule. Love without respect is not love worth keeping. Respect shows in ordinary moments, tone, patience, honesty, and presence. I learned that my silence is not permission for someone to rewrite me. Silence can be a strategy. Silence can be dignity. Silence can be the moment you stop feeding someone's ego. I didn't need to rewrite the past. I just needed to stop repeating it. Years later, people still asked what happened, and I kept answers short. We divorced, I said. It wasn't a match. I didn't tell the full story at dinners. I didn't need to. The lesson wasn't for applause. It was for living. When I walked past mirrors, I saw a man who took his life back without theatrics. I saw a man who learned to build and protect at the same time. Tiana wanted visible trophies, an apartment, a car, a check. She didn't understand the real value was in what cannot be grabbed: trust structure, quiet preparation, and self-respect. She used to treat my calm like a weakness. Now I treat my calm like a boundary. I didn't look for updates on her life. I didn't check what she posted. I didn't wonder who she replaced me with. My peace didn't depend on her consequences. It depended on my choices. The choices became consistent, and consistency became my new normal. After the first court appearance, Tiana tried a new tactic: friendliness. She sent a message through a mutual friend, saying she hoped I was eating and sleeping, that she didn't want any bad blood. The wording felt like a mask, polite and rehearsed. I didn't respond, because every response became a handle she could grab. Simone told me to assume every sentence could be read aloud in court. So I stayed silent and let the filing speak. The silence irritated her. She called it cruelty in private, but it wasn't cruelty. It was containment. I had spent years containing myself for her comfort. Now I have access to me for my safety. She was used to managing my emotions with tone. She couldn't manage what she couldn't reach. When she couldn't reach me, she reached for money and control instead. That reach produced more records. The more she reached, the more the file grew. The more the file grew, the less her charm mattered. I watched the pattern, and I didn't interrupt it. Reggie asked for everything from the last 6 years: bank statements, credit card records, lease documents, and any receipts I could find in drawers. I sat at the table at midnight, pulling papers from folders like I was doing taxes for a life I didn't recognize. Some charges were small, almost reasonable, which is how the pattern stayed hidden. Then there were spikes: high-end restaurants, ride shares to hotels, boutique purchases on nights she claimed she was in bed early. Reggie didn't speculate. He made columns and totals. He showed me which charges repeated and which ones appeared in clusters. Patterns aren't opinions. They are mathematics. When I saw the same hotel name more than once, the reality turned solid. I didn't throw anything. I didn't break anything. I stapled receipts to notes and labeled dates. It felt cold, but it wasn't cold. It was honest. Honest is often quiet. I kept working until the pile became a binder, then until the binder became a case. Layla worked the human side of the puzzle. She didn't chase drama, she chased routine. She noted how Tiana left the house, which route she took, which locations repeated. She tracked a downtown Marriott, a wine bar on South Congress, and a condo complex near the Domain. She photographed the same man twice, then another, then a third. Each report came in a plain envelope with a simple label: date, time, location. I opened them alone. No music. No conversation. Just facts. The photos weren't staged. They were ordinary moments that shouldn't have existed in my marriage. A hand on a back. A kiss at a valet stand. A laugh in a lobby we once walked through together. I didn't ask Layla to interpret. I didn't need interpretation. The images were already statements. I put them in the binder and moved on. I didn't seek revenge. I sought clarity that could be presented without argument. That is what the record gave me. I didn't confront her because confrontation would have served her. She wanted a scene, a mess, a fight she could point to as proof that I was unstable. Instead, I stayed predictable at home and precise in private. I still took out the trash. I still asked if she needed anything from the store. I still kept my voice even. Tiana mistook my steadiness for weakness and grew bolder. She talked louder on the phone. She left more often. She began letting new purchases sit on the counter like trophies. Every time she performed confidence, she left another trail. I didn't stop her mid-act. I let her keep acting, Because acting always slips when the actor believes the audience is fooled. In the garage, she had already told her friends I had no spine. I didn't argue with the insult. I used it. If she believed I had no spine, she would never suspect I was building one quietly. She didn't see a plan because I didn't show one. My silence wasn't emptiness. It was containment. One evening, she came home smelling like a fragrance I didn't recognize and dropped a designer bag on the couch. She looked at me and smiled like she was daring me to ask. I didn't. She filled the silence with a remark about finally treating herself. I nodded and returned to my laptop, not because I was hiding, but because I was finished feeding her. Later, I heard her laugh in the bedroom while typing fast. She said my name like a joke. I wrote the time down in my notebook, then wrote the time she fell silent when she heard my steps. That's what changed. I stopped begging for connection and started tracking the truth. I didn't need to catch her in a confession. I needed a pattern that couldn't be denied. She didn't know she was being measured. She thought she was being ignored. Ignored people get careless. Measured people get accountable. I didn't let myself spiral into questions. I wrote dates, statements, and outcomes. It was simple. It simply kept me from breaking. Simone warned me that court isn't a moral theater. It's a place where proof either holds or collapses. She told me, judges are allergic to performance. They want consistency. So we made everything consistent. Our filings used simple language. Our exhibits matched our claims. Our timelines included receipts and third-party records, not assumptions. Clarissa ensured my trusts and licensing agreements were documented properly and separated from marital property under the law. I didn't hide assets, I structured them lawfully before marriage and maintained documentation. That detail mattered. Tiana wanted the narrative that I built something during marriage and owed her a cut. Clarissa's dates and signatures told a different story. Simone's job was not to sound angry. Her job was to sound correct. She sounded correct because the paperwork was correct. I learned that correctness is louder than outrage in court. Outrage fades. Records remain. We chose records. Tiana chose emotions and slogans. The judge chose records. That was the difference. Tiana's attorney sent letters demanding disclosure, implying I was concealing money. Simone responded with one sentence that mattered: we will comply with all legal disclosure requirements, and we will also request full disclosure from your client. That balance shifted the tone immediately. It signaled we weren't afraid of transparency. The same week, Reggie identified how Tiana kept withdrawals just below review thresholds. He calculated totals and showed the pattern of intentional avoidance. Simone presented that pattern as a question, not an accusation. She asked, "Can you explain why these withdrawals repeat under the same amount across months?" The question forced Tiana's side to respond, and responses create vulnerabilities. They tried to call it coincidence. Reggie showed frequency. They tried to call it budgeting. Reggie showed luxury charges alongside it. They tried to call it a necessity. Reggie showed brand names and hotel suites. The argument wasn't personal anymore. It was arithmetic. Arithmetic has no sympathy. Arithmetic just adds up. Tiana couldn't charm arithmetic. She tried anyway. It didn't work. The deposition day arrived, and I watched Tiana sit across the table like she was still at dinner with friends. She smiled at first. She used polished language. She tried to frame herself as supportive and patient. Then Simone began asking about dates, locations, and charges. Tiana's smile tightened. She said she couldn't recall. Simone showed a receipt. Tiana said she didn't recognize it. Simone showed the hotel check-in. Tiana shifted in her chair. It wasn't dramatic, it was incremental. A performance doesn't collapse in one moment. It collapses in small contradictions that stack. After an hour, Tiana stopped trying to appear calm and started sounding irritated. Irritation reads as entitlement. Entitlement reads as dishonesty when the documents disagree. Simone stayed neutral and kept asking. I answered when asked, short and factual. I didn't add commentary. I didn't add feelings. I didn't give them anything to twist. When it ended, Tiana walked out quickly, and her attorney didn't look at her the same way. That was the first crack she couldn't ignore. It showed. After the deposition, Tiana sent a text from a new number. "Why are you doing this?" it read. "I thought we could be civil." I didn't answer. Civil didn't mean letting her lie without consequences. Civil meant letting the court handle it. That night, she tried to bait me into an argument at home, asking if I enjoyed humiliating her. I said, "Talk to your attorney," and went back to my room. She stood in the hallway for a long moment, then walked away. I heard her slam a drawer. I didn't move. She wanted me to explode so she could label me unstable. She wanted a story to tell. I gave her none. The next day, she told a mutual friend I was cold. The friend forwarded the message to me. Simone added it to our file because even that label supported our point. She kept attempting to control perception rather than correct facts. Judges hear facts. They ignore labels. I stayed quiet and let her waste energy on labels. My energy went into preparation. Preparation is how quiet people win. In the weeks that followed, she continued spending from the joint account as if she could outrun the record. She booked a weekend in Napa, posted glasses clinking, and wrote a caption about peace and abundance. Reggie documented it. She bought 2 more bags, posted mirror photos, and wrote about self-worth. Reggie documented it. She claimed to the court she was barely surviving. Reggie documented the contradiction. I didn't stop her from spending in secret. We used lawful motions to restrict funds when appropriate, with notice and procedure. That mattered. I wasn't trying to trap her illegally. I was letting her choices speak under the rules. Every charge created a timestamp. Every timestamp created a thread. Tiana couldn't resist attention, and attention always leaves a trail. When she tried to justify spending as business expenses, Reggie requested supporting documents. The supporting documents didn't exist. The judge noticed. That's the difference between a narrative and a record. A narrative can be polished. A record must be produced. She couldn't produce. I could. I didn't enjoy it. I accepted it. Clarissa reviewed every asset line by line and explained what could be contested and what could not. Some things were simple: the lease in her name, the furniture on her credit cards, the car title. I let those go without drama, because the fight wasn't about objects. Other things required precision: licensing revenue, equity positions, and trust distributions. Clarissa ensured every document was dated properly, executed properly, and stored properly. She reminded me that courts punish ambiguity. So we removed ambiguity. We attached exhibits, referenced clauses, and followed disclosure rules. When Tiana's side implied I was hiding money, Clarissa pointed to the paper trail and said we were compliant. Compliance isn't exciting, but it is powerful. Tiana had lived on the assumption that confidence wins. Courts don't reward confidence. Courts reward clarity. Clarissa built clarity into every page. Simone built clarity into every sentence. I built clarity into my behavior by not reacting. Together, we made it difficult for anyone to paint me as reckless. Tiana tried anyway, but her records didn't support it. Records matter more than opinions. That was the lesson she never learned. I kept working through the process, but work felt different now. It wasn't an escape. It was stable. I wore the same hoodie to meetings and spoke the same way I always spoke. No one at work knew what was happening at home, because I didn't bring it there. That quiet protected me. When Tiana tried to call my employer, pretending to confirm income, Clarissa had already anticipated it. A formal notice went to my HR, stating any communication should be directed to counsel. The attempt didn't land. I didn't call her to argue about it. I noted it and moved on. That's what changed after the garage. I stopped trying to correct her behavior directly. I corrected it through boundaries and procedure. Boundaries don't argue. Boundaries simply exist. She didn't like boundaries because she couldn't negotiate them with tone. She couldn't punish a boundary with silence, because silence was no longer my weakness. I used to fear her leaving. Now I feared returning to the man I was when I let her stay while she treated me like a background. I refused to go back. I kept moving forward, one document at a time. The night before the final hearing, Simone met me in a small office with plain walls and no distractions. She reviewed our exhibit list and asked me to answer mock questions. Out loud. She corrected my wording when it sounded emotional. Don't say you felt abandoned, she told me. Say she was absent. Don't say she humiliated you, she said. Say she made statements about your income. Facts. Dates. Records. She wasn't teaching me to be cold. She was teaching me to be precise. Precision is what the court can use. She told me to keep my answers short, avoid guessing, and ask for clarification if a question was vague. The advice felt simple, but it mattered. People lose cases when they overtalk. People lose cases when they chase moral victories instead of legal ones. Simone didn't chase moral victories. She chased finality. Finality was what I needed. I left the office and drove home without music because my mind was already quiet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for her mood to decide my night. My night belonged to me. On the morning of court, Tiana dressed like confidence and could be admitted as evidence. She wore a tailored outfit, perfect hair, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When she saw me, she tried a soft greeting, like we were acquaintances. I nodded once and kept walking. Her smile twitched. Inside the courtroom, she sat upright and whispered to her attorney with quick, sharp movements. I sat still. The judge entered, and the room shifted into order. Order favors the prepared. I didn't look at Tiana's face. I looked at the bench, the clock, and the folders. Everything about court is structure: who speaks, when, and what can be proven. Tiana's life with me had been structured too, but her structure was controlled through emotion. This structure was different. It didn't respond to her tone. It responded to documentation. She seemed surprised by that, even as she sat there. I could see it in the way she leaned forward, expecting her charm to move the room. It didn't. The room stayed neutral. Neutrality is dangerous for people who rely on performance. When the judge asked about my assets, Simone answered with exact language and attached exhibits. When the judge asked about Tiana's spending, Simone didn't accuse, she presented. The difference mattered. The judge asked Tiana direct questions, and her answers began to drift into vague territory. The judge pulled her back to specifics. Tiana stumbled. She asked to clarify. She asked to review. Each request sounded like a delay. Judges noticed delays. Reg's reports were simple enough to follow and strict enough to trust. Layla's logs supported timing and location without editorial. Clarissa's documentation explained structures without hiding anything illegal. Together, the picture was plain. Tiana wanted support based on a story that didn't match her behavior. When the judge asked about a particular hotel charge, Tiana tried to minimize it. Simone pointed to the suite level and the dates. When Tiana claimed she didn't remember, the judge reminded her she had sworn to tell the truth. The room held that reminder like a weight. It wasn't loud. It was final. I watched her posture change, and I understood what fear looks like when it can't be joked away. After the ruling, Tiana's friends waited in the hallway, the same friends who had once treated my marriage like a joke. Their faces had changed. They looked at their phones. They avoided my eyes. Tiana tried to speak to them, but they didn't move toward her the way they used to. Confidence is contagious, and so is consequence. When I walked past them, I didn't smirk. I didn't say anything. I walked the same way I always walked. Outside, I got into my car and sat with my hands on the wheel for a moment, breathing. I didn't feel proud. I felt relieved. Relief is quiet. It doesn't demand an audience. I drove home and let the day settle. Later, Simone called to confirm next steps, and her voice stayed professional. Clarissa texted a reminder about closing accounts properly. Everything stayed procedural. That procedure protected me from slipping into old emotions. The system did what it was designed to do when given solid information. It recognized patterns and corrected an imbalance. Tiana had used imbalance as her weapon. Now the imbalance was corrected by a judge with a pen. Tiana called me later that night from another number, voice trembling. She said she didn't understand how things went so wrong. She said she never meant to hurt me. She asked if we could meet and talk privately. I said no. I told her to communicate through counsel and ended the call. The boundary was simple, and that simplicity protected me. I didn't need her apology. Apologies without accountability are just noise. I had lived in noise for years. Now I live quietly. Quiet allowed me to hear myself again. The next day, she sent another message saying she missed what we had. I didn't respond. What we had was a home where I walked softly to avoid being judged. What we had was a marriage where she laughed at my career and called it dumb. What we had was contempt disguised as charm. I didn't owe that any more to my life. I wasn't punishing her. I was choosing myself. The difference matters. Punishment keeps you attached. Choosing yourself sets you free. I stayed free by staying firm. Moving out wasn't dramatic. I packed boxes, labeled them, and took what was mine. I didn't argue over small things. I didn't fight over dishes or throw pillows. I took my notebooks, my documents, and the few personal items that mattered. I left the rest because objects were never the point. Tiana watched from the doorway, arms crossed, as if she was waiting for me to break. I didn't. When I carried the last box to the car, she asked if I was really done. I said yes. She asked if I ever loved her. I didn't answer that question, because it was a trap. If I said yes, she would use it to guilt me. If I said no, she would use it to call me cold. I refused the trap. I got into the car, closed the door, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, she looked smaller, not because she lost, but because she no longer controlled the frame. I turned the corner and didn't look back. In my new place, the first thing I noticed was how silence can feel warm. I set my keys on the counter and listened. No sighs. No cutting comments. No laughter behind a closed bathroom door. I opened the fridge and saw the food I chose. I sat on the couch and watched a movie without waiting for someone to roll their eyes. That first week, I kept expecting tension to appear. It didn't. My body slowly stopped bracing. I slept deeper. I woke up without dread. I took a walk through my neighborhood and realized my shoulders were lower than they used to be. I didn't need to monitor my tone. I didn't need to announce where I was going. I didn't need permission to relax. That's how you know a home is a home. You can exist without rehearsing. The quiet didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like space I owned. I didn't fill it with distractions. I let it do its work. Recovery isn't loud. It's a series of ordinary days that don't hurt. Donnell came over on a Sunday with wings and a quiet look that said he had been worried longer than he admitted. We ate and watched a game. He didn't ask for details at first. He just sat in the same room with me like that was enough. Eventually he said, "I thought you were disappearing." I told him I was. I told him I didn't know how to name what was happening while it was happening. He nodded like he understood. Some men don't need speeches, they need presence. Later, Keisha called and asked what weekend I could come by. I told her the next one. She said, "No excuses," and laughed, not cruel, just firm. That laugh sounded different from Tiana's laugh. It didn't cut. It was held. When I hung up, I realized I still had people who wanted me without conditions. I had forgotten what that felt like. I didn't apologize for leaning on them now. I let them back in. Keisha's house smelled like food and familiar noise. She didn't treat me like a victim. She treated me like her brother. She asked one question, "Are you safe?" I said yes. She nodded and changed the subject, letting me breathe. Later, when we washed dishes, she said, "You don't have to earn your place in people's lives." The sentence landed and stayed. 4 years, I had been trying to earn permission to exist in my own home. I had edited myself down to quiet and called it love. Keisha didn't say she hated Tiana. She didn't need to. She said what mattered. I had value without performance. That idea felt strange at first, like a language I had forgotten. Over time, it became true again. I started answering calls without checking who might be annoyed. I started making plans without expecting them to be cancelled for someone else's mood. I started speaking at normal volume. The smallest changes felt like repairs. Work moved forward, and my financial life stayed quiet by design. I didn't buy a flashy car. I didn't change my wardrobe. I didn't post about a new chapter. I kept my systems intact because they had saved me. I met with Reggie once more to close out loose ends, and he told me something simple: the truth always shows in patterns. I thought about that sentence when I remembered early moments with Tiana. The pattern was always there: praise followed by pressure, affection followed by testing, laughter followed by cutting remarks. I hadn't wanted to call it a pattern because patterns are hard to ignore once named. Now I name patterns fast. It isn't bitter. It's awareness. When someone's respect is inconsistent, their love is unreliable. I learned to require consistency from anyone close to me. I also learned to give consistency to myself. That meant routines, sleep, and boundaries. It meant saying no without speeches. It meant not rescuing people from consequences they chose. Tiana chose hers. I chose mine. The difference became my peace. A few months later, I ran into Tiana at a grocery store in North Austin. She saw me first. I could tell by the way her body stiffened. She approached with a cautious smile, like she was testing whether I would explode. I didn't. She said she hoped I was doing well. I said I was. She asked if we could ever be friends. I said no. She looked startled, then offended, then quiet. There was no scene. I paid for my groceries and left. In the parking lot, I realized I didn't feel a rush of pain. I felt nothing sharp. That surprised me. I had expected anger to linger. It didn't. I had already done my mourning in the years before court, when she sat in the same house and treated me like a background. This was just a person I used to know asking for access again. I didn't owe access. I drove home and put the groceries away, and the moment passed. That's what freedom feels like. The past knocks, and you don't have to answer. Sometimes people asked why I didn't fight the divorce papers when they first arrived. I kept the answer short, because she was fighting over the wrong things. They assumed I meant money. I meant identity. She wanted me to beg because begging would have confirmed her power. She wanted me to be loud because loud would have made me look unstable. I gave her a signed packet because it kept her confident, and confidence made her careless. Carelessness produced evidence. Evidence produced truth. Truth produced an outcome. I didn't do it to win. I did it to stop losing myself. A man can recover money. A man can't recover years of self-respect easily once it's chipped away. I decided I would not give her another chip. That decision guided everything: who I hired, what I documented, how I spoke, and when I stayed silent. People think silence is surrender. Sometimes silence is a strategy. Sometimes it is survival. For me, it was both. I stopped arguing with her narrative and started building my own record. The record was stronger than any argument I could have made. Looking back, I can name the exact moment I stopped being afraid: the night in the garage with cold Thai food on the passenger seat. I heard her call me broke and spineless, and the shame that had been sitting in my chest finally turned into clarity. I stopped trying to be chosen by someone who didn't respect me. I stopped competing with strangers I never met. I stopped bargaining with silence. That was the real divorce, long before the paperwork. The court day was just a formal ending. The real ending happened in private, when I decided my life would not be a stage for her contempt. That decision didn't make me loud. It made me steady. Steady is what carried me through investigations, filings, and hearings. Steady is what kept me from turning into the thing she wanted to describe: a broken man in a hoodie. I stayed in the hoodie, but I wasn't broken. I was building boundaries the way I build systems: quietly, carefully, and with documentation. When the judge read the ruling, it felt like the world finally agreed with what my gut had known for a long time. Even now, I keep the binder in a locked cabinet, not because I want to relive it, but because it reminds me what preparation looks like. The tabs are clean: finances, timelines, communication, exhibits. It's the opposite of how my marriage felt. Chaos lives in vagueness. Safety lives in clarity. Sometimes I open it and read the first page, the one that started everything, the sticky note that said she would be gentle. I remember how her smile looked at that table, and I remember how it disappeared when the verified numbers were read. I don't open the binder to feel superior. I open it to stay honest about what I survived. It keeps me from romanticizing the highlight reels. It keeps me from rewriting contempt into misunderstanding. It reminds me that disrespect isn't a phase. It's a choice. Tiana chose it repeatedly. I chose to stop absorbing it. That's why the binder exists. It is proof that I can protect myself without shouting, and without becoming cruel. It is proof that I can be calm and still be firm. It is proof that I can leave. Before everything collapsed, there was a wedding that looked clean in photos. We married in a small venue outside Austin with warm lights, a short guest list, and a playlist Tiana curated like it was an event for approval. My parents hugged her like she was family. She smiled for every camera. People told me I looked lucky. I believed them. I remember standing beside her, hearing vows, and thinking stability had finally arrived. What I didn't see was how she treated the day like a launch, not a commitment. After the reception, she talked about levels and the life we deserve, and I nodded like those words were love. I didn't question it. The photos still exist, bright and polished. They don't show the later dinners where she rolled her eyes at my work. They don't show the weekends she left without explanation. They don't show the garage at night. Pictures are good at hiding patterns. I learned to watch behavior instead. Behavior is the real record. Behavior is what the court eventually saw. Behavior is what I see now, faster than before. I don't confuse a good photo with a good life anymore. During our second year, I asked her to sit with me and plan finances. I said we should budget, reduce debt, and give the business runway. She smiled, nodded, and then spent anyway, always with a reason that sounded reasonable. A dress for dinner. A gift for a colleague. A weekend reset. When I asked why there were charges I didn't recognize, she told me I was micromanaging, that money anxiety was unattractive. I didn't raise my voice. I just stopped asking. That's how the pattern grew. She spent, I swallowed, and she learned swallowing was my reflex. Later, when I started structuring assets quietly, she assumed I was doing nothing because I wasn't talking about it. She thought silence meant ignorance. It didn't. It meant privacy. There is a difference. She treated my caution like weakness, but caution built the layer she couldn't reach in divorce. When the court process started, she tried to make my caution look suspicious. Clarissa and Simone showed it for what it was, planning and compliance. Tiana didn't lose because I was ruthless. She lost because she was careless. Carelessness creates proof. Proof doesn't negotiate. The court doesn't care how much you feel you deserve. It cares what you can justify. She couldn't justify. At the end of all of it, I didn't win a trophy. I won a life that feels like mine. I eat breakfast without tension. I sleep without bracing for betrayal. I laugh without checking who might punish me for it. I answer my mother's calls. I show up for my sister. I meet Donnell on Sundays. I work hard, but I don't disappear into work to avoid home, because home is no longer a battlefield. Tiana wanted an audience and a payout. She got a record and a consequence. I got quiet and a future. I didn't need her to admit anything. I didn't need her to understand my pain. I needed distance, boundaries, and a clean ending. The judge's ruling handled the legal part. My decision in the garage handled the personal part. I learned the difference between being loved and being used. I learned that respect is not a bonus, it is the base. Without it, everything else is performance. I don't live inside performances anymore. I live inside choices I can stand behind. That is the real payoff, and it is not something she can take. If this hit you, share it with someone who needs to hear that peace is possible after betrayal. Drop free in the comments if you're choosing yourself from today, and tell me, what was the exact moment you knew you were done? The end.